Welcome to Unveiling Death. I am Rabbi Jeffrey Weil. From One Life to the Next Life with author Elissa Felder. Elissa Felder's book, From One Life to the Next Life, The Sacred Passage After Death, draws upon her decades of experience in the world of Chevra Kaddisha, sacred Jewish burial societies, and upon her experience as a mother whose baby son Sam, of blessed memory, died at 4.5 months. Elissa is a board member of JADE, the Jewish Association for Death Education. She is also founder and director of Core Connects Rhode Island, which deepens women's connections to Jewish wisdom and values. Check out Elissa's wonderful teaching on YouTube and buy her book. Elissa Felder, thank you so much for being on Unveiling Death.
Thank you for having me.
So you have worked, dwelled, taught, written in the realm of bereavement and death. And even before your son Sam died as a baby, as an infant, which I'm sure was obviously a tragically motivating factor here to get you into this field. I'm wondering if there's something about you, Elissa, that predates that if you were to look back and at yourself, even in your childhood, teenage years, and you say, oh, it makes sense that I, Elissa, would be comfortable with bereavement, death, dead bodies, and that sort of thing.
Perhaps the nature of my childhood and beyond was that I was always curious, and I was always seeking to understand things. And so as much as there was the paralyzing grief of losing a baby who I'd poured all my heart and soul into for even before he was born, and then after his birth, and he had a heart defect, and we were very hovering over him in terms of his health and doctor's appointments and all the things that we were very focused on him. So that was a big crushing blow when he died, and there was that grief piece. And then there was a curious piece, like what happened to him? Where did he go? Why don't I know anything about what Jewish wisdom has to teach us about death and the afterlife? And so I think that curiosity was something that I brought with me into that space. And then after I learned that my friends from our community that we were part of in Washington, D.C. in the 1980s, my friends had collected together to prepare him in the Jewish way for his burial. And I was very interested, again, in the right time, not right at Shiva when I was introduced to the idea, but afterwards. What did you do? And what did he look like? And what happened to him? Again, curiosity coupled with fascination. So maybe that answers your question in terms of what I brought into space, unprepared for this landscape that I was now confronted with, but wanting to live. I was always excited about life, and I always wanted to live my life. Right. This was like the rug got pulled out from under us. So it was a little bit of a challenge to keep going.
Sam was born with a heart defect. And yes. Did you know that at birth?
Yes. We knew actually before birth that he had some issues. We knew he had a kidney issue. We didn't know all the things. And this was the 1980s when diagnostic testing is not as advanced as it is now. And even now, it's still somewhat limited. Right. And so at the point where they didn't know what else to do, the medical team, it was like, okay, well, now we have to do open heart surgery. Now we have to take a look inside, and then we'll fix him from the inside. But they didn't fix him. When they opened him up on the operating table, they saw that his heart was so incompatible with life that they couldn't put it back together. So that was the realization that we went into this procedure, surgery, open heart surgery, with the anticipation that we were going to see him on the other side in the neonatal intensive care. And very tragically, he died on the table.
So there was some hope for you and your husband, Michael, when Sam was born, even though there were these medical issues. You still, he came into this world with parents that were hoping.
Yeah. Hoping and praying. And again, I didn't have death on my radar.
Right.
Death happened to old people. Okay, we have this baby and he's got some issues, and then he got born, and then he had these issues. Okay, we're going to deal with the issues. And then what's the next thing to do? What's the next thing to do? And there was always hope. There was always, okay, we don't quite know how he's going to grow up. We don't quite know what he's going to look like or what his issues will be, but we're warrior parents and we're going to take care of this baby and he's ours and we're going to love him and we're going to do all the things. So death wasn't anywhere in my thinking.
So Jewish tradition prescribes a 30-day grieving period for the loss of a child. And I have always felt that that seemed incongruous with the depth of the loss. A mere 30 days may not really satisfy a parent's need. And you are an observant Jew. And I'm wondering if you felt, or in retrospect, feel or don't feel that that 30-day mourning period is adequate. And I'll say that for, for if when a parent dies, even an elderly parent, it's a lot longer. You're staying cottage for 11 months. It's a year status as mourner. But when a child dies, a tender child, it's 30 days.
Life at that moment was so chaotic that I didn't have any bandwidth to have an opinion about the Jewish tradition's take on 30 days versus 1 year. And there's no question in my mind that a 30-day prescribed mourning period is not meant to define your mourning. It doesn't mean you stop mourning after 30 days and you get on with life as if it never happened. And so let's change the language and let's say the grief that one feels, that I felt, let's make it personal, the grief that I felt when Sam died never went away.
Hmm.
It changed, and my relationship with it changed, and how I manifest it changes. But if we see, which I do, grief as the other side of the coin of love, my love and my attachment to Sam never ends. And there's actually a mystical teaching that souls of family members kind of go through lives together. And so Sam is always a part of who I am and who I want to be. He's very much connected. I feel very connected to him. So yes, we didn't mourn formally for him for 30 days, only for 30 days and no more. But the ongoing grief that one feels for the loss of a child lasts your whole life.
Right.
And we do have other things, to be fair, that we do have yard sites, yearly anniversaries of the death of your child. There's a yard site kind of recognition that you had a child who died. And there's Yiska that we say in certain times in the synagogue where we're identified as mourners and we say prayers for our loved ones who have predeceased us. And thank God we went on to have other healthy children. And those children always knew they had a baby brother, an older baby brother. And that was a part of who we are. Like I light a candle for him on Friday nights, and we have pictures of him in our home. And I talk about him because that's part of my process and what I felt like I wanted him to be in the world was somebody who didn't disappear. And so, yes, we didn't say Kaddish for him for a year, but we did and do mourn for him all the time. He's always
Right.
a part of our family and a part of us.
Right. So you mentioned your children, and you've commented to me previously that your kids have said, and they're young adults now, and they've said that they kind of grew up in the shadow of a deceased older brother. How has that been for them?
That they grew up in the shadow of death,
Yeah.
that to them is norm,
Uh-huh.
right? There wasn't never a time where they didn't know there was a child before them. So it's a given. It's not like, oh, I wish I didn't have that. And I hope, again, I'm projecting a little bit onto them, but I'll explain why I answer this way, that having an awareness that there's an end to one's life can actually be very life affirming in the sense that we in this world are not going to live forever. There'll be a transition after we die. And so having that as a bookend, you get born and you die, and knowing there's a bookend at the other end, perhaps I hope can give them a perspective on their lives that's very motivating and life affirming. Plus, one of my daughters lost a baby about 9 years ago, and her baby was 3 months old. And as much as it's so, so tragic and you wouldn't wish it on anyone and all the things, she couldn't say as I did, this doesn't happen to babies. This doesn't have, she knows it happens to babies, just don't want it to happen to you when it's your baby. And she had a model. She could look to my husband and to myself and say, my parents survived this. And as much as I don't know how I'm going to survive this, and I have my own grief journey, and I have my own relationship with my husband, and I have a little twin brother of this baby that died to take
Mhm.
care of and to look after. So her grief journey didn't have this doesn't happen and how can this happen to me? It did have how can this happen to me, but it didn't have, there was a little bit more recognition that this is a thing. And I could say to her, I know what this pain might look like. And if you want me, I'm here for you.
Mhm.
And I don't have the answers for what your journey will be, but I can stand with you and I can be present for you. And I think that's something that we, the comforters of the mourners, whether we've had our own losses or not, on some level, we have to check our own grief at the door coming into a space of somebody who is grieving. If you want to know how to help them, it's about them, not about you. So as much as I walked in with all my knowledge and all my experience and all my wealth of I now 30 years later, and here I am showing up for my daughter, very quickly learned that she has to do this on her own. And I can hold her hand and I can perhaps be a little bit more sensitive about things I might say or questions I might ask to be very focused on her and what's helpful for her. If you don't want to talk about it, if she doesn't want to talk about it, I'm not going to ask you any questions. But know that I'm here and we're here.
Right.
And at certain points along the way, they did ask my husband and as a couple, she and her husband asked us different questions about our journey when they wanted to ask the questions, not when we were giving our unsolicited advice.
Yeah.
And so the I was not, I think safely say I wasn't frightened of her pain. I wasn't frightened of it. I could hold her hand.
Wow, it's a really powerful statement to not be frightened of her pain. I mean, as parents or just as people who love, I am frightened of the pain that my children might feel
Right,
in
right,
life, have felt
right,
and might and will feel, and it scares me. I fear their fear.
right,
But you're saying in this situation, which is it's a very heavy one because of because of the knowledge and wisdom that you bring and the experience that you bring to it, you are not frightened of her pain, you were not frightened for
right.
her pain. So I do also wonder, Alyssa, like, I mean, I am doing this podcast. It's on death. It's on grief. Um, you you till this garden as well. I've learned by doing this podcast, like a lot of people are exploring these deep issues now, particularly grief. Anderson Cooper has his wildly popular podcast. I'm just like right behind him in this genre. You know, he has like a zillion listeners, and I have, some, but in any event, but I do wonder sometimes, and I'm interested in, I'm trying to figure this out for myself. Is there, is it helpful to express, is there a point at which expressing grief on a regular way, and honestly, sort of like a perpetually constant way, that becomes like too much? Does it become self-perpetuating? You are a person, as you've said, like you embrace life. You know, you want to live, and you have lived. But is there a potentially a less healthy aspect, or an unnecessary or distracting aspect to thinking about our grief, talking about our grief, teaching it, reading about it, writing about it, and so forth? What do you say?
Um, a couple of things. One is it does say in our Torah, it
Hmm.
says don't mourn excessively. And I wonder what that means. What does excessive mean? And perhaps one of the answers that I have come to is if it stops you from living. So on the Anderson Cooper Grief podcast, there's a description, I can't remember who gave it, about grief being either a cave or a tunnel. And if grief is a cave that you enter and you never leave, you never come out of it, you don't go to weddings and you don't go to births and you don't have joyous events and you don't have parties and you don't do all the things that are part of the world of simcha and joy and appreciating the beautiful world that we live in, if you at some point you're not doing that, and again, what point that is everybody's journey. If you're not doing that, then I guess the clinical term would be you're stuck in your grief. And if you're stuck in your grief and you're not living, then you need help. You
Mhm.
need somebody to talk to. You need, to go. I did that. I was stuck. I needed grief therapy and I needed all the things. I needed to go to a group, like a support group, and I needed massage and acupuncture and all the grief therapy, all the things that could get me beyond a cave experience into a tunnel experience.
Hmm.
And there's a wonderful writer by the name of Dr. Edith Eva Eger who wrote a book. She's a Holocaust survivor from Auschwitz, and she wrote a book called The Choice. And one of the things she says in there, which again is something I glop onto, is expression is the antidote to depression. So for me, that resonates well. I needed to express my grief. If somebody came to me and in the early stages of losing Sam and invited me to a party or to a wedding, I couldn't go. And that was okay. It was okay to not be okay. I had in my mind, oh, 30 days of grieving, like we started off this podcast. I should be better. I should be better. I wasn't better. I wasn't
Mhm.
ready for that. So I think we have to be kind to ourselves and not add this. And I needed permission. I had my friends who said, Alyssa, your baby died, 4 months ago. It's okay. You can stay home or you can do the things you need to do.
Right.
And I worked actually in the world of infertility and infant loss. And then in those days was a nurse, and I worked in a high risk OB inpatient unit with women who were losing babies. And to me, that was like my perfect job because I wasn't alone in this. I was with all these other people. And then I started getting stronger and I started, thank God, with healthy children. And then my life went in a different direction. But I always have that grief and I always need to express that grief in the right time with the right people.
Right. Right. So that the not mourning excessively, which is in Torah, as you say, um, is also like a way to distinguish yourselves from pagan rituals, which had like wild, massive, and sometimes self-flagellating, I think, rituals around mourning. It really does capture something of the Jewish spirit, I think, of the embracing of life.
And we take our losses and we try to make do with the loss, right? So it's not unusual for people to use their losses to then give tzedakah charity to institutions or create foundations or create things that bring goodness into the world because of the loss that they've had.
Right.
Hospitals with names on them, obviously, and I've entered into this world because of the things that happened to me that I realized I've learned things along the way that have helped me, and I know by talking anecdotally to people that they don't have access to some of the wisdom that I've learned along the way, so I want to share it
Right.
in the hopes that it gives comfort and inspiration to people and can say, as much as you see death as an end, it's really just a birthing into a new reality, into an afterlife. So that piece of understanding that as we birth into this world, death is a birthing into the next world, and that context was very helpful to me.
Right. You said at one point that you mourned Sam until you didn't. And that's quite a statement as well. And I have two kind of questions about that. Firstly, what does this say about attachment and detachment, if anything, as people who love? I understand the value of a detachment. I mean, that's at the roots or the foundation of other religious traditions. But detachment can help one. And I'm not a detaching kind of person. I'm a very attached kind of person to the world, the things of the world, and the people I love, and whatever else. But I wonder, having what you have learned in your journey, if you've learned something about attachment to loved ones, to Sam, and the ability to detach somehow in order to go forward. That's first. And also, were you and Michael on a similar grief trajectory? Because that can be very complicated for a couple who loses a child.
I grieved until I didn't. The context that I think that I wrote that is that I was so incapacitated in the beginning of this grief journey. that I couldn't function. And my grief therapist asked me in the sessions we had together to talk to Sam. And I did it with her help and her encouragement and her expertise. She metaphorically held my hand as I sat in her office and I spoke to Sam. I told him how much I loved him. I told him how I'd done everything I could to save him, that I didn't want him to die, that I wanted him to be in a good place. All the things
Mhm.
that you can't say, or you couldn't say, or I didn't say to a 4.5-month-old baby who I was taking care of with all of my energy. And in that process, I cried and cried and cried and cried. And it took months until I do think, I don't know. I mean, this is the honest truth for my process. I kind of cried myself out and I was tired of crying.
Mm.
And at the same time, I was trying to understand the journey of the soul, and that Sam's soul had gone into another world and it was going up into the highest of realms and it was basking in divine light. And I had played a part in his journey, the journey of his little soul. And his soul came in and it was put into this little body that wasn't capable of holding him for very long. And I really believe that he was not meant to live for more than that amount of time. And his soul had to be in the physical world for that amount of time. We, on some level now, 35 years later, can say, I feel blessed that I was given the opportunity to take care of him for that amount of time. And then his soul was released back into the physical realms. He had a kosher burial and up into those realms. And I had to let go of him.
Mm.
I did, because I have my life to live. I'm still here. And I have a lot of love that I couldn't plant on him anymore. And it needed to go somewhere else in the world.
Mm.
And for me, some of the things that I went through and the journey that I was on and the help that I got, and it's not like I don't cry over him, but I've let him go. I've accepted this reality. I'm 35 years later.
Right.
And thank God I have other children.
Right. So that letting go, is that the detachment? And is
I
that the
don't
right
know.
word for it?
I don't
Mhm.
know. I
Mhm.
mean, like I said at the beginning, we're still souls on a journey. We're still interact. The Jewish wisdom that I like is that death is a temporary separation of the body from the soul, because traditional Judaism believes in a resurrection, that the purified soul and purified body come back together again at the end of days, after the days of Messiah. So I believe in that there'll be a reconnection of his body and his soul, and and temporary separation of the living from the dead. So one day we will see each other again. And I
Ah,
do believe that enough that I can wait this out.
I get that. I believe that too. So, okay, tell me about the process trajectory of you and Michael.
Yeah. So there was a lot of grief in the beginning. And we very quickly learned that our own individual grief was too much for the other one to hold. I told you I could sit with my daughter and say, I'm here for you, but that's because I'm in a strong place. And so I can recognize that you are my daughter's in a very wounded place, and I can be there because I'm not wounded right now. When we first had this loss, we were both profoundly wounded. And we manifested that in different ways. So mine was more overt. I needed to cry. I needed to look at pictures of Sam. I needed to talk about it all and have people in the room. Shiva was filled with people and beyond. And my husband was more quiet. He wanted to be more, and he also felt like he needed to take care of me. And so the beginning of that was, number one, we are committed to our marriage and we're committed to being together. And we're allowing each other to travel our independent journeys together but separate. I'll do me and you do you, and we'll hold hands along the way.
Mhm.
and I'll let you do you, and you have to let me be me, you know. Like I wanted him to come to my groups, and I wanted him to come with me, and he was like, no, that's not what I do. I have to go into nature and talk to God, or I have to be on my own and cry, or I have to, whatever he has to do. And so recognizing that we had different ways of grieving and not judging and allowing and respecting and loving was what got us through.
So, to conclude, final question. You are, as you've been describing, you're a spouse, you're a mom, you're a grandmother, you're a writer, you're a teacher, you're a Jew, a person of faith. How would you like to be remembered?
That's a really great question. I look at some of the people that I admire or I want to be like. And so I'd like to be remembered as I think of them, which is that they live authentically and passionately and for goodness and for and that the world's better because they were in it.
That's good. Elissa Felder, I'm very grateful for this conversation. Thank you so much.
Ditto. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for your very insightful and very penetrating questions.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Many thanks to author and teacher Elissa Felder. Thank you, creative director, editor, son, Sammy Weil. Share this episode with friends and with enemies. And follow Unveiling Death. Check out the Unveiling Death podcast playlists on Spotify. Lots and lots of songs. Thank you, dear friends, for listening to Unveiling Death, Eternity in about 24 minutes, every other Monday.